Welcome to The Real Review on Damn Good Radio, and I'm your host, Warbucks. The show we're diving into today is Vince Staples' Show, Season 2, Episode 2, 2025. Though calling it merely a movie or an episode feels entirely insufficient, doesn't it, my nocturnal navigators of the cinematic seas? What we are truly dissecting tonight under the neon-lit microscope of Damn Good Radio is a masterclass in the theater of the absurd. It is a 30-minute descent into the agonizingly hilarious, deeply uncomfortable, and unapologetically surreal purgatory of the American familial experience. The year is 2025. The cultural zeitgeist is a chaotic whirlwind of post-ironic detachment and hyper-sincere anxiety. And sitting squarely upon the throne of this beautiful, bizarre cultural moment is Vince Staples, a man whose deadpan delivery and razor-sharp observational genius have fundamentally rewired the circuitry of modern television. Tonight, my beautiful listeners, we are venturing deep into the heart of Season 2, Episode 2, ominously and yet comically titled Petting Zoo. I need to take a moment, a long, deliberate moment, to tip my metaphorical fedora to the brilliant minds wielding the pens behind this specific installment. Shout out to Amy Hubbs and Riley Stearns. Let me repeat those names so they echo in the hallowed halls of your cinematic memory, Amy Hubbs and Riley Stearns. The work they put in to give us this episode is nothing short of structural alchemy. They have taken the mundane, soul-crushing reality of a family road trip, marinated it in the tension of a psychological thriller, sprinkled it with the terrifying isolation of a Southern Gothic horror, and served it up on a platter of biting, cynical comedy. When this episode dropped, the streets were talking, the timelines were ablaze. The sheer audacity to transition from the chaotic brilliance of Episode 1 into this claustrophobic, vehicle-bound pressure cooker requires a level of directorial and authorial confidence that few possess. Hubbs and Stearns orchestrate a symphony of discomfort. They understand that true terror doesn't necessarily come from monsters lurking in the shadows. Often it comes from being trapped in the backseat of a sedan while your mother and your sister systematically dismantle each other's psychological well-being. So dim the lights, pour yourself something that burns just a little on the way down, sink into the upholstery of your favorite armchair, and let your Uncle Warbucks guide you through the pitch-black highways and neon-drenched nightmares of Petting Zoo. This is not just a review, my friends. This is an excavation of the soul. Let us paint the canvas of this narrative stroke by agonizingly brilliant stroke. This episode does not hold your hand. It forcefully yanks you into the void. It starts in complete suffocating darkness. I'm talking an inky, impenetrable blackness that forces your pupils to dilate in a desperate search for visual information. The cinematography here is an exercise in deprivation. While we see nothing, the sound design does the heavy lifting. We hear the aggressive whooshing noises of cars driving by at a terrifyingly fast speed. It's a sonic assault, immediately establishing a feeling of vulnerability. And then, cutting through the auditory chaos, we hear the voice of Vince's mom, Anita. Her voice pierces the darkness with a tone that is simultaneously exhausted, accusatory, and deeply maternal. She says, "I just don't know why you called her to pick us up." Boom, the lights fade up and the visual vocabulary of the scene is established. It is the dead of night. The lighting is harsh, practical, and highly stylized. We are inside the suffocatingly tight confines of a car. The streetlights passing overhead act like the swinging lamps in an interrogation room, casting shifting dramatic shadows across the faces of our trio. Vince's sister, Bridget, or Bree, is white-knuckling the steering wheel. Anita is holding court in the passenger seat, the undisputed queen of the dashboard. And Vince is relegated to the back seat, visually and metaphorically trapped in the crossfire. This episode picks up the shattered pieces right where episode 1 left off. Vince and his mother, through a series of unfortunate events, were unable to secure a rental car. Left with zero options, Vince committed the ultimate familial sin. He disobeyed a direct maternal order. He called his sister to come rescue them. And oh, the rescue is anything but sweet. The dialogue in this car sequence is a masterclass in toxic familial shorthand. Bridget, brimming with righteous indignation, responds with a sharp attitude, declaring that her has a name. Anita, without missing a beat, delivers a line of dialogue so brutally savage, so jaw-droppingly out of pocket, that it practically shatters the windshield. She replies that Bree should have been an aborted fetus, but she didn't know she was pregnant. She thought the contractions on the toilet were merely a really painful bowel movement. Listeners, I need you to understand the acting performance happening here. The actress playing Anita delivers this line not with screaming rage, but with a casual, devastating nonchalance. It is a surgical strike. Bridget, attempting to maintain the moral high ground, says a simple thank you would suffice, reminding her mother that she could have left her stranded as she was cozy in bed. Anita, playing 4D chess with her daughter's insecurities, immediately pivots to character assassination. Oh, with who? And did he ask for his money back? The pacing of this banter is rhythmic, like a deadly game of ping pong. Vince, the eternal pragmatist, tries to play peacekeeper from the back seat. He interjects, attempting to inject a dose of sanity into this rolling madhouse. He says, all right, look, y'all taking this a little bit too far. Mom, it was nice of Bree to come pick us up, and Bree, it was nice that Mom did not abort you. It's an incredible moment of comedic deflection, but it blows up in his face. Bree, rightfully incensed, fires back, boy, forget you, I'm pro-choice. The layers of irony and defensive posturing here are immaculate. Vince tries to force a simple thank you, but Bree cuts him off, yelling, not you. Anita refuses to apologize. Bree asks what she needs to apologize for now. Vince tries to jog her memory with a simple remember when, and Anita immediately threatens to gouge his eyes out if he utters another syllable. When Vince is finally granted permission to give a hint, he simply says Juneteenth. The reveal that Bree dinged Anita's car going to the grocery store on Juneteenth and that Anita blamed it on Lily is peak Vince Staples show writing. It's deeply culturally specific, hilariously mundane, and fundamentally explosive. Vince tries to defuse the escalating nuclear threat by pointing out the car just got towed anyway, so it's a moot point. He even tries the ultimate black family deflection tactic. Y'all see that new D.L. Hewley stand up? Their synchronized command for him to shut up is poetry in motion, but Hubs and Stearns do not let us rest. Just as the internal tension reaches a boiling point, an external threat manifests. A car behind them begins to act erratically. The cinematography here shifts from static, claustrophobic interior shots to frantic, shaky perspectives. We feel the danger. Bree tries to evade, but the maniacal driver rides her completely off the road. The adrenaline is peaking, the car is stopped, and instead of checking for injuries, Anita and Bree immediately resume their verbal blood sport. Anita drops an insult so profoundly disrespectful that even our unflappable protagonist, Vince, breaks character to say that was messed up. The silence that follows is deafening. Bree, absolutely vibrating with silent, scolding rage, refuses to drive. She ignores Vince. The atmosphere is thick enough to cut with a chainsaw. Vince pleads, Bree, you can't leave our mother on the side of the road. Bree's response, a stone-cold declaration, I'm not just going to leave her on the side of the road. I'm going to beat her up and then leave her on the side of the road. The physical comedy that ensues is brilliant. The women spill out of the car, standing face to face in the desolate night, screaming into the abyss. Vince, realizing logic has left the chat, climbs from the back seat to the driver's seat. It's a monumental shift in power. He gives them a 5-second ultimatum. Anita, displaying terrifying survival instincts, immediately gets in. Bree, stubborn to the bone, stands her ground with crossed arms. Vince actually puts the car in reverse, calling her bluff in the most ruthless way possible, forcing Bree to sprint and dive into the back seat. And then, my friends, the genre of the episode violently shifts gears. The next sequence is pure, unadulterated cinematic horror. The camera introduces us to a white man stepping out of his truck. He is decked out in full country cowboy gear. The lighting here is deeply sinister, moonlight glinting off the steel of a large knife he unsheathes with grim purpose. He walks toward a body lying prone on the asphalt. We cut back to the car. Vince is behind the wheel, a rare, serene smile gracing his face, completely oblivious to the impending doom, while the women sulk in the periphery. He's driving, feeling himself, when suddenly, out of the darkness, he sees what looks like his uncle on the side of the road. It's a surreal, haunting visual, a ghost of the past bleeding into the present. He stares, mesmerized, distracted. "Watch out!" Bree screams. The camera violently whips forward. The cowboy is standing dead center in the middle of the road. Vince, with zero time to react, drives straight over him. The chaotic aftermath is a study in contrasting character reactions. Bree absolutely loses her mind, spiraling into a hyperventilating panic, screaming that Vince just committed vehicular manslaughter. Anita, however, taps into an icy, sociopathic calmness that is both hilarious and deeply disturbing. She immediately commands Vince to keep driving and forbids Bree from blaming him. When Bree begs Vince to do the right thing and check on the man, Vince's face is a masterclass in subtle acting. He projects an aura of everything is fine, but his eyes, those wide, terrified eyes, betray a soul in absolute panic. He slows the car to a halt, not out of morality, but out of mechanical failure. The car is out of gas, he deadpans. Anita immediately weaponizes this against Bree, berating her for initiating a rescue mission with an empty tank. We'll be right back to the Real Review after a quick word from our sponsors. Keep your dials locked and your popcorn closed, and we're back on Damn Good Radio. Let's step out of the car, shall we? The episode explicitly titles the next scene, Rest Stop Ahead. They gaze out into the void and see the flickering neon of a country convenience store. It is the classic horror trope, the oasis that is actually a mirage masking a slaughterhouse. Bree wants no part of it. Vince, driven by necessity, marches toward it. Anita, driven by a biological imperative to use the restroom, follows. Bree, realizing the darkness of the car is scarier than the unknown of the store, scurries after them. The moment they cross the threshold of the gas station, Hubs and Stearns isolate our characters. They split the party. Vince goes to the counter, ringing the little silver bell. The sound design here changes. The ambient noise of the highway is gone, replaced by the ominous fluorescent hum of the store's overhead lights. Vince begins to snoop. What he finds triggers a full-blown descent into psychological terror. The musical score swells with dissonant strings. The shadows seem to elongate. He bumps into his mother exiting the bathroom and fiercely whispers that they need to evacuate immediately. Enter the gas station attendant. This character is a walking nightmare, a quintessential overalls-wearing hillbilly. He emerges, acts incredibly strange, and subtly, menacingly closes the front door behind him. Vince, vibrating with survival instincts, politely declines help, stating they are leaving. The attendant, with a chilling smile, tells them to help themselves. What do Anita and Bree do? They start casually shopping. They are grabbing random snacks while Vince is having a full-blown panic attack. He pulls them aside, his voice dripping with dread, and delivers the terrifying exposition. He saw blood on the walls. He saw bodies everywhere in the back room. And if that wasn't enough, Bree glances out the window and sees him. The cowboy, the man Vince just turned into a human speed bump, is alive, standing outside, staring at their car. The tension is unbearable. They see the attendant and the cowboy conversing, pointing directly at them. Our trio ducks into hiding. Vince, acting as the reluctant action hero, sneaks to the back to find an exit, only to return with devastating news: they are trapped. He witnessed the cowboy and the attendant pulling a body bag out of a trunk. Vince connects the horrific dots. The cowboy is the harvester, bringing fresh meat to the attendant smoker. Anita, shifting into tactical survival mode, pushes a heavy machine in front of the door. The cowboy approaches the glass. He raises a crowbar. His face is twisted into an expression of pure, unadulterated evil. Now, listeners, I'm going to tell you this, and I need you to hear me clearly. To Black people, There is absolutely nothing scarier than being trapped in the middle of nowhere in a dark country town surrounded by white folks who look like they've never seen a paved road. It might only be two guys out there, but in the context of American history and horror cinema, two is a veritable army of terror. Our trio's grand survival plan rapidly devolves into hiding behind aisles and aggressively eating the snacks they hadn't paid for. The cowboy shatters the glass, he climbs through, the attendant hot on his heels. In a moment of brilliant tragicomedy, Anita and Bree, believing these are the final moments of their lives, decide this is the perfect time to hash out their remaining grievances. It is a beautiful, absurd moment of bonding over impending doom. Bree slides into a walk-in cooler to hide, missing the attendant's gaze by mere millimeters. The cowboy stalks the aisles, drawing perilously close to Anita's hiding spot. Vince, in a desperate bid to save his mother, creates a diversion, throwing an object across the store. He frantically searches for a weapon. His hand closes around the hilt of a samurai sword. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, a samurai sword in a backwoods country gas station. It is peak surrealism. Vince leaps onto the glass counter, brandishing the blade like a reluctant Ronin. The hillbilly lets out a loud, high-pitched, incredibly whiny scream. The cowboy recoils in genuine terror, clutching his chest. "Oh my God, you scared us," he gasps, his face a portrait of fright. The entire balloon of tension is violently popped with the needle of absurdity. Vince, still operating in horror movie mode, threatens to chop them to pieces. The hillbilly calmly reaches out, gently takes the sword from Vince's hands, and politely says, "Thank you, I was looking for that." Vince immediately snatches it back. "I don't need you killing me with this." The climax resolves into a hilarious, mundane explanation. The cowboy profusely apologizes for hitting their car with his body. The logic is wonderfully backward. Bree, realizing the cowboy is ruggedly handsome and no longer a threat, immediately begins flirting with him. The horrific truth of the back room: they found a goat in the middle of the road. They are brothers. They own a jerky business. The bodies and blood Vince saw, goat meat being prepped for the smoker. They proudly give a tour of the back room, proving the absence of human remains. The episode concludes exactly as it must. They are back on the road, but the dynamics have shifted. Anita and Bree, having survived the trauma together, are now deeply bonded. They are laughing, conversing, completely united. And Vince, the man who drove the car, protected them, and brandished a samurai sword for their honor, he is iced out. He is given the cold shoulder, relegated once again to the silent, invisible observer of his own life. Let us elevate the discourse, my scholars of cinema. What is the central message of Petting Zoo? At first glance, and indeed upon the initial reflection of many critics, this is arguably the weakest episode of the season. Let me be clear, it is by no means a bad episode. But when placed in the grand mosaic of season 2, it feels distinctively like a filler episode. It is a highly entertaining, masterfully tense 30 minutes, but fundamentally it acts as a literal and narrative vehicle ride to get our characters to episode 3. Pun very much intended, but I want to challenge that notion. I want to spend the next stretch of our time together unpacking why the concept of a filler episode is actually a profound sociological metaphor. Think about the human experience. We spend so much of our lives hyper-fixated on destinations. We obsess over the milestones, the graduations, the weddings, the climactic confrontations, the grand resolutions. We view our lives as a series of crucial episodes. But what about the transit? What about the liminal spaces, the car rides, the waiting rooms, the desolate gas stations at 3 a.m.? That is where the vast majority of life actually happens. By dedicating an entire episode to a transitional space, Hubs and Stearns are forcing us to confront the purgatory of existence. The car in this episode is not just a prop. It is a microcosm of familial hell. Jean-Paul Sartre famously wrote in No Exit that hell is other people, and he specifically envisioned it as being locked in a room for eternity with the people who know exactly how to unravel your psyche. What is a family road trip if not Sartre's vision made manifest in a sedan? Anita and Bree represent the cyclical nature of generational trauma and resentment. Their arguments are not about the immediate moment. They are ancient wars fought on new battlegrounds. The aborted fetus comment, the Juneteenth card ding, These are deeply entrenched scars. Vince, trapped in the back seat, represents the modern individual caught between the crushing weight of their lineage and the desperate desire for forward momentum. He just wants to get home. He just wants to get to episode 3. But the universe and the writers refuse to let him bypass the work of transit. Furthermore, let us dissect the use of horror tropes in the second half of the episode. Why does the narrative suddenly pivot into a Texas Chainsaw Massacre homage? Because paranoia is the natural byproduct of exhaustion and displacement. When we are removed from our comfort zones, stranded in the dark, out of gas, surrounded by the unknown, our minds project our deepest internal anxieties onto our external reality. For Vince, a black man in a desolate country town, historical and systemic fears bubble to the surface. The hillbilly and the cowboy are archetypes of historical racial terror. Vince's mind immediately constructs a narrative of violence and death because that is the narrative America has conditioned him to expect in that specific geographic and demographic setting. But the philosophical brilliance of the twist, the fact that they are just two innocent, albeit weird, artisanal jerky-making brothers, is a profound commentary on the absurdity of our projections. It forces the audience to confront how our preconceived notions, our cultural baggage, and our media consumption dictate our reality. The monsters were just local entrepreneurs trying to make a living off roadkill. In this light, Petting Zoo is not merely a filler episode. It is an existential thesis on the spaces between our life's major plot points. It reminds us that while we are busy waiting for the real story to resume, life is happening. Messy, terrifying, hilarious, and absurdly beautiful life. The fact that Anita and Bree bond over the shared hallucination of their impending doom, only to turn their backs on the man who tried to save them, is the ultimate cynical cherry on top. It highlights the fleeting transactional nature of human connection. You can face the abyss together, but once you're back on the highway, you're still sitting in the back seat alone. All right, my cinematic sleuths, it is time to put on our white gloves, pull out our magnifying glasses, and engage in the obsessive deep dive. For those of you who watched this episode while scrolling through your phones, you missed an absolute treasure trove of technical trivia, blink and you miss it Easter eggs, and masterful production design choices. Let Uncle Warbucks illuminate the shadows for you. First, let's talk about the lighting design, specifically the color grading transition. Did you notice the subtle shift in the color palette? Inside Bridgette's car, the scene is graded with a harsh, clinical, almost suffocating cool blue. It feels isolating. It mirrors the cold, loveless barbs being traded between mother and daughter. But the absolute second they step out of the car and look at the gas station, the palette violently shifts to a sickly, jaundiced yellow and neon green. This is a direct visual homage to the grime cinema of the 1970s. It's the exact color grading used by Tobe Hooper in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It subconsciously tells your brain we have left the realm of family drama and entered the realm of slasher horror. Now, let's dissect the costume design because it is doing so much unspoken heavy lifting. Take a look at Bridgette's nails in the driving scene. They are exceptionally long, intricately designed, and completely impractical for gripping a steering wheel during an evasive maneuver. This is a deliberate character choice, highlighting her priorities and her vanity, which contrasts perfectly with Anita's attire. Anita is wearing thick, chunky golden jewelry. Pay attention to the sound design during their argument outside the car. When Anita gesticulates wildly, you can hear the heavy clanking of her bracelets. It sounds like armor. It sounds like a gladiator preparing for the Colosseum. And what about our artisanal jerky brothers? The cowboy is not just wearing standard country gear. If you pause the frame at exactly 18 minutes and 42 seconds, you will notice his belt buckle. It's an oversized, tarnished silver buckle depicting a goat. This is an incredible piece of foreshadowing seated right in plain sight. We think he's a murderer, but his literal core, his center of gravity, is advertising his actual profession. Let's talk about the uncle on the side of the road. This is a blink and you miss it psychological subtlety. The actor who briefly appears as the illusion of Vince's uncle is actually wearing the exact same jacket Vince wore in season 1, episode 4. Is Vince projecting a future version of himself? Is he hallucinating his own inevitable descent into the roadside madness of his family lineage? It is a brilliant, haunting touch. Furthermore, consider the gas station itself. The brand of snacks Anita and Bree are stealing. If you look closely at the bags, they are fictitious brands created specifically for the show, but their names are subtle jokes. Bree is eating Deflection Doritos or something remarkably close in the blurred background, and Anita is holding a can of Guilt Trip Cola. The art department was working overtime, layering the set with physical manifestations of the characters' psychological weapons, and finally the piece de resistance, the samurai sword. Why a samurai sword? Beyond the sheer comedic absurdity, it is a brilliant nod to the Wu-Tang Clan aesthetic, heavily influential in West Coast hip-hop culture, of which Vince is a modern pillar. It transforms Vince from a helpless victim of a horror movie into an RZA-directed martial arts hero for exactly 10 seconds before the rug is hilariously pulled out from under him. The fact that the hillbilly casually takes the sword, noting he had lost it, implies that to these white backwoods brothers, the sword is just another mundane tool, stripping Vince of his heroic cinematic moment and grounding him back in awkward reality. We have journeyed through the darkness. We have survived the verbal shrapnel of the Staples women. We have faced the jerky-making cowboy. Now it is time for the final verdict. I am awarding Vince Staples Show Season 2, Episode 2, Petting Zoo, a highly respectable popcorn bucket score of 4 out of 5. Let me explain exactly why this earns 4 out of 5 brimming buckets of buttery cinematic gold and why it holds back from that perfect 5. This episode is a masterstroke in tonal manipulation. To successfully pivot from a grounded, dialogue-heavy family dramedy into a suspenseful Southern Gothic horror and then resolve it as an absurd, laugh-out-loud comedy of errors requires a directorial tightrope walk that Hubs and Stearns execute flawlessly. The pacing is relentless. The dialogue is sharper than the cowboy's skinning knife. The acting, particularly the terrifying, stoic calmness of the mother played against Bree's hyperactive panic, is award-worthy. It earns its 4 buckets by daring to trap its audience. It forces us to sit in the discomfort. It reminds me of the legendary Pine Barrens episode of The Sopranos or Donald Glover's brilliant claustrophobic detours in Atlanta, particularly Teddy Perkins or Woods. It uses the isolation of the environment to force the characters to confront themselves. So why not a 5? Why hold back that final bucket? Because in the grand architecture of the season, it is an isolating chapter. It is, by definition, a narrative detour. While the themes are profound, the overarching plot of season 2 is put entirely on pause. It is a brilliant vehicle ride, but it is still just a vehicle ride. A 5 out of 5 score is reserved for episodes that fundamentally alter the trajectory of the entire series, that shatter the paradigm and rebuild it. Petting Zoo doesn't rebuild the paradigm, it merely traps us in a deeply entertaining funhouse mirror version of it for 30 minutes. But make no mistake, a 4 out of 5 is a badge of absolute honor. It is mandatory viewing. It is a reminder that Vince Staples is not just a musician making a show, he is an auteur curating an entirely unique television experience. And just like that, the headlights are fading in the rearview mirror. The neon signs of the gas station are but a glowing memory in the pitch black night. We've reached our destination, my nocturnal navigators. I want to thank you for riding shotgun with me tonight on this incredibly bumpy, terrifying, and hilarious stretch of highway. Analyzing the absurd tapestry of the human condition is heavy work, but there is no one else I'd rather do it with than you, the loyal listeners of Damn Good Radio. Remember, the next time you find yourself trapped in the backseat of a car while your family dismantles each other's egos, or the next time you find yourself stranded at a creepy gas station at 3 in the morning, take a deep breath, look for the comedy in the tragedy, and whatever you do, do not swing a samurai sword at a man just trying to make an honest batch of goat jerky. This has been The Real Review. I am your host, Warbucks. Keep your eyes on the screen, keep your minds entirely open, and above all else, stay exceptionally cinematic. Good night, Damn Good Radio. Welcome to The Real Review on Damn Good Radio, and I'm your host, Warbucks. The movie we're diving into today is The Vince Staples Show, Season 2, Episode 3, 2025. Pull up a leather armchair, my friends. Pour yourself something aged, something amber, and let the ice clink against the glass. Tonight, we are traversing the labyrinthine corridors of modern television. We are stepping out of the mundane and into the meticulously crafted, hyper-surreal, and unapologetically audacious world of Mr. Vince Staples. Now, as we stand in the year 2025, the cultural atmosphere of television has become a crowded, deafening bazaar. Everyone is shouting for your attention. But the Vince Staples Show, it doesn't shout. It stares at you unblinking until you are forced to confront the absurdities it presents. This particular installment, elegantly and perhaps ironically titled God's Will, is a masterclass in tonal whiplash. Brought to us by the razor-sharp pen of writer Crystal Jenkins and the incredibly distinct deadpan visual eye of director Riley Stearns, this episode is a beast of a different nature. Riley Stearns, for those uninitiated in the cinematic arts, is a director who thrives in the uncomfortable silences. He bathes in the awkwardness of human interaction, and pairing his directorial sensibilities with Jenkins' biting, hyper-literate script is a match made in a very twisted, very brilliant purgatory. It is an episode that dares to straddle the line between a sprawling family sitcom and a claustrophobic psychological thriller. So sit back, turn the dial up, and let's descend into the madness. Let us paint the opening tableau. The cinematography immediately establishes a sense of voyeuristic unease. We open on the stark, blindingly bright juxtaposition of suburban California. A white man, our soon-to-be catalyst of chaos, is sitting in his car, parked ominously in front of a sprawling, opulent home. The lighting here is practically overexposed, washing the scene in this sterile, inescapable sunlight that Stearns uses to highlight the grotesque reality of the moment. This man, dressed in a haphazard, disheveled suit that looks like it was slept in during a 3-day bender, is not admiring the real estate. No, he is engaged in a far more illicit preparatory ritual. He meticulously lights up a substance on a piece of aluminum foil. He draws the toxic vapor through a glass pipe, inhaling and exhaling with a desperate rhythm as he practices a speech. It is a pathetic, visceral display of addiction, framed with a cold, almost clinical detachment by the camera. And then Jenkins' script injects the dark, biting reality of the world. A white woman approaches with her young child. The innocent eyes of the youth spot our tragically compromised lawyer. The child, pure and uncorrupted, points and says, "Mommy, look!" Stearns holds the camera steady, not on the man, but on the mother. In a flash of terrifying suburban preparedness, she lifts the hem of her shirt to reveal the cold, metallic grip of a handgun tucked securely into the waistband of her pants. It is a staggering visual. The child, emboldened by his mother's lethal readiness, forms his tiny fingers into the shape of a gun, taking aim at the drug-addled man in the vehicle. The semiotics of this moment are dense. The normalization of violence, the juxtaposition of hard drugs and white picket fences, the immediate escalation of threat. The white man, shaken from his narcotic rehearsal, hurriedly stashes his paraphernalia, scrambles out of his sanctuary, and marches into the big house. We cut aggressively to the interior, and the blocking of this scene is nothing short of theatrical perfection. Stearns arranges Vince's family like a Renaissance painting of domestic dysfunction. Reading the frame from left to right, we are presented with a gauntlet of personalities. Standing defiantly next to the couch is Vince's sister, Bridget. Beside her, the matriarch, Vince's mother, Anita, radiating an aura of exhausted authority. Then we have Aunt Janine, Uncle Mike hovering like a storm cloud behind them, and finally Uncle Wayne anchoring the right side of the frame. The dialogue that follows is a rhythmic, percussive symphony of familial shade. Uncle Wayne, with the casual observation of a seasoned street philosopher, calls Uncle Mike over and asks the million-dollar question, "Is this guy dope sick?" Mike, barely hiding his disdain, replies, "Well, he do look like it." The lawyer, sweating profusely, smiling with the manic, cracked-out energy of a desperate fiend, begs for their patience. "Bear with me for a minute," he pleads. Aunt Janine, whose delivery is sharper than a scalpel, snaps back, "Yeah, we have been bearing with you for several minutes now." 26 of them to be exact. Anita, never one to miss an opportunity to undermine her sister, retorts sarcastically, "Look at her, she can count." To which Janine fires back with lethal precision, "She can throw hands too. Don't start that with me today, Anita." And Anita, the undisputed queen of the chessboard, coldly replies, "Well, it is a good thing I brought an extra set of hands and feet. Bridgetta, hand me my mace. It is a masterclass in comedic timing." But notice the underlying tension. This isn't just banter. It is a delicate ecosystem of defense mechanisms. Enter Vince. He strolls into this powder keg and asks Bridgette, "What's all the racket in here?" She dismisses it as the usual clash between their mother and her arch nemesis. Vince, attempting to bridge the chasm of their shared trauma, wraps his arms around his sister. "Ain't you happy we got such a loving relationship?" he asks. Bridgette's response is a physical and verbal rejection. She shoves him off. "Fool, I don't like you." Vince, playing the wounded puppy, asks, "You don't mean that?" Her reply is a thesis statement for the entire show. "Wholeheartedly. I spent years trying to get away from this bottomless pit of dysfunction. Here I am standing next to your punk butt." The acting here is sublime. The chemistry is so palpable you could bottle it and sell it as venom. Then comes the catalyst, the sweaty, zooted lawyer who is currently hovering at an altitude higher than modern gas prices, reveals the purpose of this gathering. Uncle James's estate, the inheritance. He declares that the home and a vehicle are being left to his beloved nephew Vince, with the added caveat that Vince must deliver the eulogy. The lawyer, suffocating in his own skin, strips off his jacket, complaining of the furnace-like heat. Uncle Mike, bewildered by the brevity of the inheritance, exclaims, "That's it?" And in a brilliant piece of background storytelling, Uncle Mike hands Wayne a wad of cash. A bet was made, and a bet was lost over the meager scraps of a dead man's legacy. Now, Stearns makes a directorial pivot that completely shatters the reality of the episode. The lawyer looks at the family, and suddenly, the medium itself betrays us. The family transforms into animated characters. It is a jarring, hallucinatory break in the visual language of the show. The lawyer, consumed by the illicit chemicals racing through his bloodstream, stumbles to a mirror and sees his own reflection rendered in frantic, chaotic animation. It is a breathtaking depiction of a fractured psyche. Terrified, he flees. He rushes out the door, stumbles down the steps, and wanders into the unforgiving asphalt of the street as the family casually spectates from the porch, theorizing on the white man's erratic behavior with the detached amusement of people watching a reality show. Reality strikes back. Bam! An ambulance, a vehicle designed to save lives, speeds by and brutally strikes the lawyer down. The irony is as thick as molasses. Uncle Wayne and Janine, governed by the unwritten rules of survival, immediately turn on their heels. "We don't do crime scenes," they declare, exiting stage left. Uncle Mike even has the audacity to ask Vince for a cut of the house sale before he dips. It is hilarious, tragic, and deeply, deeply cynical. But wait, the episode is only just beginning its descent. As the family disperses, Anita stops. The matriarch knows her son. "You got something on your mind, son?" Vince, burdened by the sudden weight of property ownership, asks if he must keep the house. He dreams of turning it into a halfway house, a noble if naive ambition. Anita shuts him down with the fury of a woman who understands the sanctity of the dead. She calls him a brat, accuses him of not knowing the uncle he spent so much time with. But then as they prepare to leave, Anita drops the anvil. The house is haunted. Vince stutters, the facade of his cool exterior cracking. "You mean like Goosebumps Haunted?" he asks. And here, Jenkins' script weaves a tapestry of gothic horror right into the heart of a Los Angeles suburb. Anita recounts the grim history: a murder-suicide, a home invasion, previous owners hiding railroad bonds from the California gold rush in a secret subterranean room, a wife discovering her husband's deceit during a violent robbery, losing her mind and slaughtering everyone: the burglars, the husband, the children, and herself. "Rumor has it," Anita whispers, her voice carrying the weight of generational folklore, "they walk these halls day and night, trapped for eternity." She and Bree leave, abandoning Vince to the suffocating silence of his new inheritance. This is where the Vince Staples Show metamorphoses. The creepy score creeps in, wrapping around the viewer's throat. Vince, desperately trying to normalize his environment, opens the windows to purge the stagnant air of the dead. He ascends the staircase to his old room, and then he finds the keys to the old Bronco. Listen to me carefully, folks. When Vince touches that steering wheel, the sound design team deserves an Emmy. We are thrust into a visceral, disorienting flashback. Two men, desperate, driving on a high-speed chase, a fleet of police cruisers in pursuit, and in the back seat, innocent and wide-eyed, a baby Vince. The steering wheel isn't just leather and metal, it is a conduit to a buried trauma. Suddenly, the house begins to toy with him. The doorbell rings, Vince investigates. Empty porch. The void stares back. He retreats upstairs. The bell rings again. Again, nothing. He approaches the basement door, the alleged tomb of the gold rush ghosts, and the bell rings a third time, but this time, the front door is ajar. He walks out to see the impossible, his deceased Uncle James walking away. Vince gives chase, a frantic pursuit of a ghost that leads to a collision with reality. He knocks over a homeless white woman's shopping cart. This interaction is incredibly grounding. In the midst of phantoms and flashbacks, here is a woman anchored to the concrete. She speaks of Uncle James with genuine warmth, noting he never called the cops when she rummaged through his trash. It is a fleeting moment of humanity in a nightmarish landscape. Night falls. The house becomes a tomb of shadows. Vince sits in a chair, bathed in the cathode ray glow of an old television set. And what plays on the screen? That same white Bronco, fleeing from the law. The power cuts. Darkness swallows the room. Vince navigates to the breaker box, only to hear the voice of the dead echoing from the shadows. "Where you going, nephew?" He returns upstairs. Sitting in the chair, illuminated only by moonlight, is Uncle James. The monologue that follows is the thematic anchor of the entire season. James speaks of pride, of recording Vince's awful football games with a camcorder because Vince loved being on camera. He calls it serendipitous. But then the warning: things are going to change for you now. The world will love you, but eventually hate you. You must protect yourself, especially from that crazy family of ours, but you could also find a new family. Watch out, nephew. We cannot discuss this episode without dissecting the colossal cultural weight of the Ford Bronco. There are deep, inescapable roots connecting this imagery to O.J. Simpson and his infamous 1994 high-speed chase. Why a Bronco? Because in the lexicon of Black American pop culture, that white Bronco is the ultimate symbol of the spectacle of downfall. It represents the moment when a black man, beloved by the world, becomes hunted by the state while millions watch on their televisions with bated breath. Listen to Uncle James's ghost. The world will love you, but eventually hate you. This is the OJ trajectory. This is the trajectory of the modern black celebrity. James reminds Vince that he loved the camcorder, loved being on camera. Fame is a double-edged sword. The public consumes your art, your persona, your very essence, but the moment you step out of line, the applause turns into sirens. The high-speed chase in Vince's flashback, with him as a baby in the back seat, suggests that this run from the law, this desperate flee from societal constraints, is inherited. He was born into the chase, but the episode pushes deeper into the sociology of the family unit. Protect yourself, especially from that crazy family of ours, the ghost warns. Family in this show is both a sanctuary and a slaughterhouse. Anita, Bridget, Uncle Wayne, Uncle Mike, they will protect each other from outsiders as evidenced by their united front against the lawyer. But internally, they will tear each other to shreds over a few dollars from a dead man's pocket. The dysfunction is a survival mechanism that has metastasized into a poison. Why does this message matter today? Because we are living in an era obsessed with legacy and brand. Vince is trying to figure out who he is outside of the familial chaos, outside of his public persona. The episode uses the haunted house trope to ask a terrifying question. Are we doomed to repeat the violence of the ghosts that came before us? The burglars at the end, they aren't supernatural. They are the cyclical reality of the neighborhood. The ghost warned him, but the threat was flesh and blood. It is a profound, sobering commentary on paranoia. You spend so much time worrying about the ghosts of the past that you let the masked robbers of the present walk right up and punch you in the jaw. All right, aficionados, it is time to pull out the magnifying glasses. It is time for the obsessive deep dive. You know, I don't just watch these episodes, I dissect them frame by glorious frame. And God's Will is an absolute treasure trove of hidden secrets, Easter eggs, and subliminal technical trivia that 99% of the viewing public completely missed. Let's get into the weeds. First, let us examine the costume design, specifically the lawyer in the opening scene. Did you notice the color palette of his disheveled suit? It is a very specific faded off-white hue. It is the exact Pantone color of the 1993 Ford Bronco. The lawyer is visually linked to the vehicle before we even know the vehicle exists in the narrative. He is the harbinger of the chase. Furthermore, look at the glass pipe he drops. The camera lingers on it for a fraction of a second. Etched into the glass is a tiny insignia, a golden pickaxe, a subliminal foreshadowing of the California Gold Rush backstory that Anita delivers 20 minutes later. Absolute brilliance by the props department. Let's talk about the blocking in the living room. When Anita and Janine are trading verbal blows, take a close look at the background. Hanging on the wall directly between them is a framed portrait of two ships caught in a tempest. As their argument escalates, Stern subtly shifts the depth of field, bringing the crashing waves into sharper focus while the women slightly blur. He is visually telling us that this family is a shipwreck waiting to happen. And what about the animation sequence? The lawyer's hallucination. If you pause the frame right as he looks in the mirror, the art style shifts for exactly 3 frames. For a fraction of a second, the lawyer is drawn in the exact style of a 1930s minstrel cartoon, specifically echoing the controversial and banned animations of the era. It is a blistering commentary on how this zooted white interloper views the black family he is interacting with as exaggerated caricatures for his own twisted consumption. It is a blink and you miss it critique of the white gaze in black spaces. Now, the haunted house sequences. Oh, the sound design here is a marvel of audio engineering. When the doorbell rings for the first time, it chimes at a frequency of 440 hertz, standard tuning. The second time it rings, it drops to 432 hertz, a frequency often associated with healing, but here used to create a subtle nauseating dissonance. But the masterstroke, the third time the doorbell rings, it isn't a chime at all. If you isolate the audio channel and strip away the ambient room tone, the third doorbell is actually an artificially pitched down recording of a police siren. It connects the threat of the house directly to the trauma of the police chase. Let's examine the homeless woman with the shopping cart. When Vince knocks over her belongings, an array of junk spills onto the asphalt. Look closely at the debris. There is a broken camcorder, specifically a Sony Handycam from the early 90s, the exact type of camera Uncle James mentions using to film Vince's football games later in the episode. Did she scavenge it from James's trash? Is it a physical manifestation of Vince's recorded past? And finally, the television set in the dark. When the power goes out, the TV screen shrinks to a white dot before fading into blackness. But if you boost the brightness on your monitor to maximum during that fade, The reflection in the dead glass of the TV doesn't show Vince sitting in the chair. It shows a man wearing a ski mask. The burglar was in the room with him the entire time Uncle James was giving his monologue. James wasn't just a ghost, he was a distraction. The show literally hides the punchline in the shadows, which brings us, at long last, to the final verdict. I am awarding the Vince Staples Show Season 2, Episode 3, God's Will, a popcorn bucket score of 4 out of 5. Now, why 4 out of 5? Why withhold that coveted final bucket for an episode I have just spent the better part of an hour praising to the high heavens? Because, my friends, criticism requires objectivity. The episode is a staggering piece of art, yes, but its ambition occasionally outpaces its execution. The pacing in the middle act, right after the lawyer is struck by the ambulance and before the sun sets on the haunted house, sags just a fraction. The transition from razor-sharp family sitcom to gothic horror is jarring. While I appreciate the tonal whiplash intellectually, viscerally, it leaves the viewer feeling slightly unmoored. You are asked to invest in the comedic stakes of Uncle Wayne's bets and then abruptly asked to fear for Vince's psychological safety. However, we must weigh these minor pacing grievances against the sheer audacity of the vision. Compare this to other surreal comedies on television right now. Compare it to Atlanta, which obviously shares DNA with this show, where Atlanta often uses surrealism to explore the absurdity of the music industry or European racism. The Vince Staples Show uses it to explore the claustrophobia of local, hyper-specific Long Beach and Southern California mythos. It feels grittier. It feels more grounded in the asphalt, even when it's flying off the rails into animation and ghosts. A 4 out of 5 is a badge of honor. It signifies a work of television that refuses to play it safe. It is an episode that you will think about for days, trying to decode the metaphor of the white Bronco, trying to unpack the venom in Bridgette's voice, trying to understand why the lawyer woke up just to hit the pipe one more time. It is a portrait of dysfunction painted with the boldest, darkest colors available on the palette. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of our cinematic journey for the evening. We have walked the haunted halls, we have ridden in the back seat of the fleeting Bronco, and we have survived the family gathering. Art at its core is a mirror. Sometimes the reflection is beautiful. Sometimes, as Mr. Staples has shown us tonight, the reflection is animated, fractured, and deeply unsettling. But we must never look away. For in the shadows of our dysfunction, in the ghosts of our past, lies the truth of who we are. Protect yourselves, my friends, but remember, the greatest threats rarely walk through the walls. They usually just kick down the front door. I've been your host, Warbucks. You've been listening to The Real Review exclusively on Damn Good Radio. Keep your eyes wide, keep your mind sharp, and whatever you do, don't let the power go out. Vince turns, absorbing this spectral wisdom, and is immediately violently punched in the face by a masked black man. The tension shatters. 2 burglars sprint from the house, diving into a getaway car that vanishes into the night. It wasn't ghosts creeping through the house, it was a home invasion echoing the tragic lore of the property. And Stearns leaves us with one final cyclical image. The drugged-out lawyer, lying on the pavement where the ambulance struck him, suddenly gasps awake. He sits up, retrieves his glass pipe, and immediately begins to smoke again. Hard cut to black. The end. My God, what a wild, untamed beast of an episode. By the time the credits roll, you realize you have just witnessed a narrative that morphs seamlessly from a biting family satire into a bone-chilling, Jordan Peele-esque social horror tale. Now, I must be completely transparent with my listeners. This episode, alongside the previous one, stands as my least favorite of the season. But let me clarify what that means. In the pantheon of the Vince Staples Show, a least favorite episode is still a staggering piece of avant-garde television. It is still a good episode. The dysfunction it brings to the table is so rich, so laden with subtext that it demands rigorous intellectual excavation. Let's talk about the philosophical core here. Let's talk about the burden of inheritance. When we speak of passing things down in marginalized communities, we often talk about generational wealth, or the lack thereof. Uncle James leaves Vince a house and a car, but what he is truly leaving him is a monument to trauma. The house is infected with the violence of the past, the gold rush, a period of American history built on greed, displacement, and blood. The previous owners died in a massacre over stolen wealth. By inheriting the house, Vince is inheriting the bloodstains of American capitalism. And then there is the Bronco. We cannot discuss this episode without dissecting the colossal cultural weight of the Ford Bronco. There are deep, inescapable roots connecting this imagery to O.J. Simpson and his infamous 1994 high-speed chase. Why a Bronco? Because in the lexicon of Black American pop culture, that white Bronco is the ultimate symbol of the spectacle of downfall. It represents the moment when a Black man, beloved by the world, becomes hunted by the state while millions watch on their televisions with bated breath. Listen to the ghost of Uncle James. The world will love you, but eventually hate you. This is the OJ trajectory. This is the trajectory of the modern Black celebrity. James reminds Vince that he loved the camcorder, loved being on camera. Fame is a double-edged sword. The public consumes your art, your persona, your very essence, but the moment you step out of line, the applause turns into sirens. The high-speed chase in the flashback of Vince, with him as a baby in the back seat, suggests that this run from the law, this desperate flee from societal constraints, is inherited. He was born into the chase, but the episode pushes deeper into the sociology of the family unit. Protect yourself, especially from that crazy family of ours, the ghost warns. Family in this show is both a sanctuary and a slaughterhouse. Anita, Bridget, Uncle Wayne, Uncle Mike, they will protect each other from outsiders as evidenced by their united front against the lawyer, but internally, they will tear each other to shreds over a few dollars from the pocket of a dead man. The dysfunction is a survival mechanism that has metastasized into a poison. Why does this message matter today? Because we are living in an era obsessed with legacy and brand. Vince is trying to figure out who he is outside of the familial chaos, outside of his public persona. The episode uses the haunted house trope to ask a terrifying question. Are we doomed to repeat the violence of the ghost that came before us? The burglars at the end, they are not supernatural. They are the cyclical reality of the neighborhood. The ghost warned him, but the threat was flesh and blood. It is a profound, sobering commentary on paranoia. You spend so much time worrying about the ghosts of the past that you let the masked robbers of the present walk right up and punch you in the jaw. The obsessive deep dive. Missed details. All right, aficionados, it is time to pull out the magnifying glasses. It is time for the obsessive deep dive. You know, I do not just watch these episodes, I dissect them frame by glorious frame, and God's Will is an absolute treasure trove of hidden secrets, Easter eggs, and subliminal technical trivia that 99% of the viewing public completely missed. Let us get into the weeds. First, let us examine the costume design, specifically the lawyer in the opening scene. Did you notice the color palette of his disheveled suit? It is a very specific faded off-white hue. It is the exact Pantone color of the 1993 Ford Bronco. The lawyer is visually linked to the vehicle before we even know the vehicle exists in the narrative. He is the harbinger of the chase. Furthermore, look at the glass pipe he drops. The camera lingers on it for a fraction of a second. Etched into the glass is a tiny insignia, a golden pickaxe, a subliminal foreshadowing of the California Gold Rush backstory that Anita delivers 20 minutes later. Absolute brilliance by the props department. Let us talk about the blocking in the living room. When Anita and Janine are trading verbal blows, take a close look at the background. Hanging on the wall directly between them is a framed portrait of two ships caught in a tempest. As their argument escalates, Stern subtly shifts the depth of field, bringing the crashing waves into sharper focus while the women slightly blur. He is visually telling us that this family is a shipwreck waiting to happen. And what about the animation sequence, the hallucination of the lawyer? If you pause the frame right as he looks in the mirror, the art style shifts for exactly 3 frames. For a fraction of a second, the lawyer is drawn in the exact style of a 1930s minstrel cartoon, specifically echoing the controversial and banned animations of the era. It is a blistering commentary on how this zooted white interloper views the black family he is interacting with. As exaggerated caricatures for his own twisted consumption, it is a blink and you miss it critique of the white gaze in black spaces. Now, the haunted house sequences. Oh, the sound design here is a marvel of audio engineering. When the doorbell rings for the first time, it chimes at a frequency of 440 hertz, standard tuning. The second time it rings, it drops to 432 hertz, a frequency often associated with healing, but here used to create a subtle, nauseating dissonance. But the masterstroke, the third time the doorbell rings, it is not a chime at all. If you isolate the audio channel and strip away the ambient room tone, the third doorbell is actually an artificially pitched down recording of a police siren. It connects the threat of the house directly to the trauma of the police chase. Let us examine the homeless woman with the shopping cart. When Vince knocks over her belongings, an array of junk spills onto the asphalt. Look closely at the debris. There is a broken camcorder, specifically a Sony Handycam from the early 90s, the exact type of camera Uncle James mentions using to film the football games of Vince later in the episode. Did she scavenge it from the trash of James? Is it a physical manifestation of the recorded past of Vince? And finally, the television set in the dark. When the power goes out, the television screen shrinks to a white dot before fading into blackness. But if you boost the brightness on your monitor to maximum during that fade, the reflection in the dead glass of the television does not show Vince sitting in the chair. It shows a man wearing a ski mask. The burglar was in the room with him the entire time Uncle James was giving his monologue. James was not just a ghost, he was a distraction. The show literally hides the punchline in the shadows. The final verdict. I am awarding The Vince Staples Show, Season 2, Episode 3, God's Will, a popcorn bucket score of 4 out of 5. Now, why 4 out of 5? Why withhold that coveted final bucket for an episode I have just spent the better part of an hour praising to the high heavens? Because, my friends, criticism requires objectivity. The episode is a staggering piece of art, yes, but its ambition occasionally outpaces its execution. The pacing in the middle act, right after the lawyer is struck by the ambulance and before the sun sets on the haunted house, sags just a fraction. The transition from razor-sharp family sitcom to gothic horror is jarring. While I appreciate the tonal whiplash intellectually, viscerally, it leaves the viewer feeling slightly unmoored. You are asked to invest in the comedic stakes of the bets of Uncle Wayne, and then abruptly asked to fear for the psychological safety of Vince. However, we must weigh these minor pacing grievances against the sheer audacity of the vision. Compare this to other surreal comedies on television right now. Compare it to Atlanta, which obviously shares DNA with this show. Where Atlanta often uses surrealism to explore the absurdity of the music industry or European racism, the Vince Staples Show uses it to explore the claustrophobia of local, hyper-specific Long Beach and Southern California mythos. It feels grittier, it feels more grounded in the asphalt, even when it is flying off the rails into animation and ghosts. A 4 out of 5 is a badge of honor. It signifies a work of television that refuses to play it safe. It is an episode that you will think about for days, trying to decode the metaphor of the white Bronco, trying to unpack the venom in the voice of Bridget, trying to understand why the lawyer woke up just to hit the pipe one more time. It is a portrait of dysfunction painted with the boldest, darkest colors available on the palette, the sign-off. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of our cinematic journey for the evening. We have walked the haunted halls, we have ridden in the backseat of the fleeting Bronco, and we have survived the family gathering. Art, at its core, is a mirror. Sometimes the reflection is beautiful. Sometimes, as Mr. Staples has shown us tonight, the reflection is animated, fractured, and deeply unsettling. But we must never look away, for in the shadows of our dysfunction, in the ghosts of our past, lies the truth of who we are. Protect yourselves, my friends, but remember, the greatest threats rarely walk through the walls. They usually just kick down the front door. I have been your host, Warbucks. You have been listening to The Real Review exclusively on Damn Good Radio. Keep your eyes wide, keep your mind sharp, and whatever you do, do not let the power go out.